Hi everyone, in this lecture I would like to talk about promises. Promises are the foundation of asynchronous programming in modern JavaScript. Now a promise is actually an object returned by an asynchronous function. We're going to talk all about that in this lecture, and this asynchronous function is what is going to return to us an object that is going to be a promise, and that promise represents the current state of the operation. Now, at the time that we receive this promise, the operation isn't finished. It is just going to give us like a promise, and based on that promise, we would know, okay, whether or not we're going to get the data from the server. Now, what does all of this mean? Let's just jump into a real-world example. And I'm going to explain this as we move along. Now, this is a JSON placeholder. This is the website that I've been talking about in our previous lecture. Now, the idea behind this is very simple. Free fake API for testing and prototyping. Now, you know all of these words except for this API. Now, API is an application programming interface. What does that mean? It means that you have an application on the front end, this application, lesson number 20, promises, and you want this application to interact with this placeholder, with this JSON placeholder. Now, the API allows this communication channel among different applications, different interfaces, and it allows you to actually go ahead and create different things. Now, that set timeout is actually an API. What does that mean? It means that the set timeout can only be accessed from the browser by JavaScript if it is an API. Otherwise, it can't be accessed, because API is something that allows two things to be connected together. In this case, it's exactly as it says, application programming interface. It provides us an interface to program our applications. And this JSON placeholder is going to give us free fake APIs so we can test and prototype and learn more about programming and more about asynchronous programming. So when we go out into the real world, we already have some knowledge of how the data is returned from the server, what kind of data, what type of data is returned from the server, and how we can actually use it in our application, like a weather app or any kind of application. So in here, if I come down here, you can see it already gives us this very simple snippet that if I just click on it, you can see it. What does it return? First, we need to dissect what it is. Now, it is a fetch function, and it does exactly what how it sounds. It fetches something from the server. So this is the URL from which it is going to fetch some data for us. It is JSON placeholder.typicode, I think, .com/todos/ the first to do. And when you run this script, it is going to give you exactly this in the browser. And you can see it is this response, and the response is going to be converted into JSON, and then from the JSON, if we log it, we see something that looks like a JavaScript object, but this in fact is not an object at all. This is a string. This is a JSON string. It looks like an object. It has keys and values, but it is actually a string. And JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. It's a notation of an object, but it's not a true object. We are going to work with this JSON placeholder API in this lecture, and I'm going to explain promises in the context of this. Now, I should come down and I should show you some more stuff. Now, these are the resources that this placeholder allows you to use. So we can grab posts, comments, albums, photos, to-dos, and users. There are going to be 100 posts, 500 comments if you fetch them, 100 albums, and so on and so forth. So there are like 6 common resources that you can practice asynchronous programming with. Now, the first thing that we need is, which of these do you want to fetch? Do you want to fetch posts, comments, or albums? I'm going to keep it simple, and I'm going to fetch the posts. And as soon as I hover on this, take a look at the bottom left corner of my browser. What is it showing? It is showing https://jsonplaceholder.ipcode.com/posts. So if I open this in a new tab, and if I take a look at that, it's going to take a couple of seconds. There we go. So it just gave me how many posts? 100 posts. And within each post, we have a user ID, an ID, a title, and a body. Now, this is nonsensical data, but the structure of the data is something that we want. The actual data is basically dummy text, and we don't care about that. So we want to fetch all of this into our application. How can we do that? Now, I'm going to create a variable because, of course, we're working with JavaScript. We need to store stuff somewhere, and I'm going to call this posts, and we're going to use the fetch function or method. And within here, we need to provide the request info or the URL. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to right click on this, copy it, and I'm going to put it within strings right here. Now we have stored all the data that is going to be fetched within this posts variable. Let's console log it so we can see what is actually happening here. And if I come here, you can see it gives us a promise. Now, this promise is exactly the literal promise word that we use in English. It is a promise that it is going to give you the data, but not right now. You need to do a little bit more work to get the data. And that's what it meant, what I meant by the couple of previous lectures when I talked about that the task is long running. It is, so you can see it's pending. It means that it has not been fulfilled. Now, you need to keep in mind that any promise is in one of three states. It's either pending, and pending means it is in the initial state, it is neither fulfilled nor rejected. The other state that a promise could be in is fulfilled, and that is when you get your data. And it means that the operation was completed successfully. And the third state is the rejected one. And it is self-explanatory. And it means that the operation was failed. Now, what we're going to use is there is a method on this object, on this posts object, that is going to give us our data. And that method is the then method. And the then method it actually returns a promise for us. Now, we have not actually worked with promises yet. Now, we need to go ahead and we need to work with them. Now, what I would like to do is I would like to comment this console log out. And you know what? I'm just going to get rid of it. And let's go ahead and let's use the then method. So I'm going to go on the posts and I'm going to say .then. So what does this mean? It means when the promise is pending, what do you want to do then? After that, what do you want to do? That's why we use .then. So we want to grab our data. And this one, what does it accept? It accepts actually a callback function. So what does it say? The callback to execute when the promise is resolved. And it also says attaches callbacks for the resolution and or rejection of the promise. So if we want to reject the promise or we want to resolve it and get our data, we need to use a callback. And that's when we are going to use our arrow function. So within here, what do we want to do? We want to grab our data. So let's go ahead and console log our data. And when I save it, you can see we got our response. Now, there is a lot of important stuff in this response. The first one that it shows us is the body of the response, and we should be able technically to see our data, but we won't. So as soon as I click on it, it says readable stream. It means that we have not yet actually accessed our data. And here is the headers. It is okay, true, redirected, false. The status 200 is always a good status. And it is type course, and here is the URL. And you can see this is an object of type response. Now, the next thing that we need to do is basically we need to convert our response to what? To a JSON string or to a JSON object. Cool. Now let's go ahead and let's do that. So should I do it right here or should I create another? You know what? I'm just going to do it right here so you can see that we are building up on something. So in here, what I would like to do is the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm just going to say .json, and I'm going to save this and we are going to run this. And you can see we again get that promise which is pending. So we actually went one step back. So why don't I just go ahead and get rid of this? And then on this function, what I would like to do is I would like to add another dot then. Because you just saw when I said, how can I move forward? Like right here. Let's move forward. Okay, I can't go back. And I'm going to say .json. It is going to give us another promise pending. So I'm going to keep this .json right here. I'm going to cut it from there. And I'm going to put it right here. And on this .then function, I'm going to rearrange this code a little bit better so you can really see what is actually happening here. So here is one of our .thens. Let me fix this. And there is going to be another .then. And this .then is going to have our information. That's why I'm going to call this actual data. So we know this .then, it returns for us the promise itself. And this .then, and that promise is going to be JSONified. And this promise, this is going to return for us the actual data. So I'm going to say console.log actual data. And when I save it, we do get undefined, which we should not get. So let me take a look at that. So we have said .then data, and then posts, we grabbed our data. Oh, we are not returning anything from the function. So I need to say return. And when I save it, there we go, we got our posts. So you need to return something. You need to return the response from this function. And since this is an arrow function, we can actually do an implicit return. So for that, I'm going to get rid of that return keyword, and I'm going to get rid of this. And now I think it is more readable. And you can see we got exactly 100 objects within this array. And it's user ID, ID, and title. You can take a look at each one of them: body, ID, title, and user ID. Now, we can actually iterate through this. Why? Because this, in fact, is an array of objects. So at the end of the day, it is basically an array right here. And we know how we can iterate through arrays. Now, what I'm going to do is we are going to use our for of loop. Let's say post of actual data. And I'm going to take a look at our post, console log post. And when I save it, you can see it's going to give us all of our individual posts, correct? From here, I'm going to comment this one out so we don't see that anymore. We can grab the user ID from the post. So as soon as you do the dot notation, we don't see the actual keys in here, but we can just write user ID. And when I save it, it is going to give us all the user ID. So it's like 1 to 10. And we can also grab the ID. Let me grab the ID. And when I save it, let's save that. There we go. So there is like 100 posts. We can grab the title using the dot, since we are iterating through an object, through an array of objects. Within every iteration, we get an object. And that object can have that dot notation available on it. And that's how we can actually select it. And you can see it's not saying posts, it's just saying post. It means that we're working with one individual post right here. And if I save this, this is going to give us all the title. Of course, it's just dummy text. So this was your very first venture into, why do I keep saying venture? Your very first attempt into the world of asynchronous programming, what I would like to do is I would like to give you another example as well. So I'm just going to comment that one out so you really get the hang of what it is that we are actually trying to do here. So in here, what I would like to do is let's actually select some other kind of data. Let's say we want to grab these to-dos. Since we have user ID, it is still the same thing. So there is this one, completed false, completed true. We could work with this property. So I'm going to say const to-dos, and I'm going to fetch the data. And I'm going to say, okay, where is the URL? The URL is right here. Put it within quotes. So let's save that. All right. And then I'm going to grab to-dos. And we are going to say dot then. And first off, what we need to do is we need to convert our response into JSON. So I'm going to say data. Data.json. Keep this in mind. We are going to be coming back to data.json a lot. And then after that it has been converted into JSON, we can actually take a look at them. So to-dos, and this is going to give us, first let's take a look at our to-dos. To-dos, let's save that. So let's come in here. We can see we have 200 to-dos. Again, take a look at the structure. We have an array of objects. It's an array, so we can iterate over it or iterate through it. We're going to use, you could do any other kind of array method. So for example, you could just say, you could use the for each method, you could use the map method, you could do whatever you want. So what I could do is I could just do the for each method, in case you're wondering about that. This is the for each method. And I'm going to say for every individual to do, what do I want to do? I want to console log it. Console log to do. And when I save it, there we go. It's going to give us every individual to do. Since every individual to do is actually an object, we do have that dot notation available on it. So I could say ID, it's just going to give us all the IDs. Or I could say completed. Remember? Completed. And it's going to give us, okay, which to-dos are completed and which are not completed. So in this way, you can actually work with these, and you already know the how you can use template strings. So what you could do is you could grab all these to-dos, and for every to-do, you could create an li. I've already shown you how you can do that. And then you will have a complete application that is actually talking to some sort of server. And that is going to be it for this lecture. And you know what? I'm going to actually do you one better, and I'm going to show to you. I feel like I can do better than this. So I'm going to say console.log. We would want to know which to-dos are completed based on their IDs and which are not. So I'm going to use our template strings. This is going to be to-do.id. And then we're going to use this one, to-do.completed. And as soon as I save it, you can see that immediately it is very understandable data. These to-dos are not completed. This is completed, not, and then this is completed. Okay, so that's it for this lecture. See you in the next one.